Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 251. Mount Longxiu, Regression. Why do you want to practice the foremost forbidden technique? He didn't know how many times he had asked this question. Mo Ran was in a good mood today, so he finally answered slowly, to go back to the past. For what? Taxian Jun lifted his eyelids and replied, to save him. It was self-evident who he meant by he. Chu Wanning stood in front of Mo Ran in his snow-white robes. If you carefully read the records related to the foremost forbidden technique, you should know that no one who used the foremost forbidden technique ever have a good ending. The last one, the Grand Master tried to bring his daughter back with him from another time and space, but he killed his own self in that time and space. You should know what happened. Mo Ran frowned, changed his sitting position, crossed his long legs and looked at him with his hand on his cheek. This venerable one doesn't know. What's there to see about this kind of failed example? Chu Wanning said, no one has ever succeeded. Mo Ran said, then this venerable one would be the first to succeed. Chu Wanning said again, once time and space are disturbed, you don't know what would the consequences be. Mo Ran almost sneered, even if the world is in chaos, what does it have to do with this venerable one? Chu Wanning was still not satisfied. Even if you really bring Shi Mingjing back from another time and space, what about your other self? How can you forgive yourself? If the incident of two Grand Masters fighting for one person happens again, have you thought about what to do? Mo Ran smiled and said, it's just another version of myself in the mortal world. If he stops me, I'll just kill him. Chu Wanning suddenly stopped talking and suddenly felt his hair stand on end. Mo Ran had really gone mad. Then what if? Chu Wanning said slowly, almost stiffly, like what happened when the two Grand Masters fighting for their daughter happened again. What if in the process of fighting over Shi Mingjing, an accident happens? That Shi Mingjing of the mortal world will probably be torn into pieces in the rift of time and space. Before he could finish his sentence, a loud clang was heard. Mo Ran suddenly stood up and kicked over the fruit platter table in front of him. Grapes, oranges, lychees, and sweets scattered about. At this moment, they were like the heads of the people he had killed, rolling all over the ground. Taxian Jun strode over, stepping on the carpet embroidered with phoenix and dark dragon. The floor was covered with crushed fruits. The grape juices flowed like blood and the lychees were crushed like brain matter. He suddenly grabbed Chu Wanning's collar in the midst of the mountain of corpses and the sea of blood. His eyes were like glinting like that of a beast. This venerable one know how you don't like him and want him to stay dead, Mo Ran said darkly, you're too vicious. No matter what, he was still your disciple. He once followed you and trusted you. Chu Wanning, how can you curse him like this? I'm not cursing him. I'm only telling you the truth. Mo Ran snapped, who wants to hear the truth from you? This venerable one will tear time and space to return to the past and save him. Let the mortal worlds tear each other apart. If anyone tried to stop this venerable one, even if it's you then. He panted for some time, his eyes were a little wet from the madness. Then what should he do? Trample all over him? But he had already broken Chu Wanning's spine. Humiliate him? Chu Wanning was already married to him. Then, kill him? Suddenly, he felt a dull pain in his heart. He couldn't say it and didn't know what else to say. Mo Ran left abruptly, leaving Chu Wanning standing alone in the empty hall. There was darkness all around him. He knew that this darkness was a trap set by that person. Be it Taxian Jun or the Baidu Immortal, they were all deeply involved. But what should he do? Once the foremost forbidden technique was used, it was not a big deal if it was just a rift. Just like how scars could form scabs, time and space could heal itself. But if the rift was too big, there would be too many variables. The two worlds would be intertwined, and in the end, it might become like what was recorded in the ancient records. It could collapse. The world revolves in a particular order. If that order breaks down, divine punishment will come, all will return to the primal state of chaos. Chu Wanning did not remember where he read this line, but the impression was very clear. It talked about the consequences of losing control of the gate of time and space, life and death. The so-called divine punishments is by grinding the two disordered time and space into dust and returning them to nothing. The price of losing control of the foremost forbidden technique would be the complete destruction of the two worlds. So, no matter what, he could not let this happen. He could not let Moran continue like this. That evening, Moran was busy dealing with the files from Kunlun, so he did not look for Chu Wanning. Chu Wanning carried a wind lantern and went to the library. This freedom was a small kindness bestowed by Moran. Moran believed that since Chu Wanning lost his spiritual core, he could no longer do anything, so except when he was angry, he did not restrict Chu Wanning's movement within Shi Sheng Peak. He did not mind Chu Wanning going to the library, at the back of the mountain, or even the arsenal. His reasoning was that it's the same as raising a cat. It was enough to grind its fangs and cut off its claws. It would be too boring to break its legs or to make the cat unable to move and completely lose its wild nature. Chu Wanning compiled all the information he could find in the library and combined it with the current situation. In the end, he concluded two things. First, the person behind the scenes was very good at using medicine, but his spiritual power was definitely not strong. This was easy to understand. Because if this person's spiritual power was strong, he would not need to borrow other people to do these things on his behalf. Second, Shi Mei's death must have been planned by the person behind the scenes. The purpose was to stimulate the hatred in Moran's heart. This kind of reasoning was also in line with what was written in the ancient scroll. 8 sufferings and everlasting hatred flower can erase all the kindness in a person's heart, but it can also retain the warm memories of a person. The complicated ancient characters were deciphered word by word. Therefore, the caster often makes the owner of the 8 sufferings and everlasting hatred flower retain normal memories of himself, making the 8 sufferings and everlasting hatred flower owner acknowledge the caster, rely on the caster, and be willing to die for him. Shi Mei had died long ago. He saw it with his own eyes, so it could not be faked. So, Shi Mei should not be the caster, but Moran obviously remembered all the good memories related to Shi Mei. And the person behind the scenes used the last bit of pure warmth in Moran's heart to tempt him to practice the 3 forbidden techniques. From the Zhenlong chess formation to control the world, to the art of rebirth techniques to resurrect the dead, up to the gate of time and space, life and death to twist the universe. Moran had indeed tried one forbidden technique after another with varying level of success. What kind of person would want to master 3 forbidden techniques at the same time? What kind of person would want to tear apart time and space, willing to risk destroying both worlds to dust to satisfy their own selfish desires? Chu Wanning could not think of the answer, but the answer to this question was not the most important thing at the moment. The most important thing was how to stop this from happening before Moran mastered the gate of time and space, life and death technique. After thinking for a while, he finally saw clearly that there was only one path in front of him. He had to kill the Taxian Jun, then go back to the past. Go back to the time before the 8 sufferings and everlasting hatred flower was planted in Moran's heart and stop it from happening. If not, he had to find a way to remove it. A person who had been affected by the 8 sufferings and everlasting hatred flower once would not be affected a second time. This way, even after the death of Taxian Jun, if the person behind the scenes still found a way to open the gate of time and space, life and death, he would not be able to use Moran's battle prowess. Kill Taxian Jun. That evening in the library, there were moths jumping into the flame, flying into the wind lantern that Chu Wanning brought. In an instant, they were swallowed by the flame. No carcass was left, only a burnt smell. Alone, Chu Wanning watched how the silly moth flew towards the flame of the candle. The flame was very bright, but his heart was very cold. Kill Taxian Jun. Kill Taxian Jun. Kill Mo Ran. Kill that pitiful man who was being controlled, being used, and whose peaceful days in life were relatively few. As his former Shizun, he did not protect him well, and now he had to personally plot his murder. Chu Wanning suddenly closed his eyes, slightly leaned back and rested his head on the bookshelf. The wind lantern flickered. He felt that he was no different from the silly moths flying into the fire. He had to kill Mo Weiyu. It was raining at that time. The incessant drizzle lingered in the bones. Chu Wanning was Mo Ran's favorite bedmate, and he woke up from his light sleep. Mo Ran's desire and energy had always been amazing. Chu Wanning did not know if Mo Ran also endlessly pesters Song Kayutong like this. He wasn't sure whether his sexual appetite was just this ferocious or if it was his desire for himself. Mo Ran was now lying beside him, fast asleep, not much different from the many long nights before. During this period of time, he was getting more and more ridiculous, and he wanted Chu Wanning more and more. It was now common for him not to pull out after he climaxed. When he woke up the next day and before holding court, he would have another round of sex with him. He had to kill him. However, the disparity between their strength was so great. Chu Wanning did not think he had a chance of winning, even if he was just beside him. Wait a little longer. He told himself so. Ultimately, there were two things that needed to be done. One was to kill, and the other was to open the gate of time and space, life and death, to determine who was the mastermind behind all these and to prevent Mo Ran from succumbing to the 8 sufferings and everlasting hatred flower. Since the first could not be done immediately, he would try the second. Open the foremost forbidden technique, the gate of time and space, life and death. He did not know why, but he had a vague impression of this forbidden technique in his mind. Combined with the ancient scroll that Mo Ran found, and after countless failures, he finally restored the manual of the forbidden technique. But because he did not have a spiritual core, Chu Wanning found it difficult to use the technique. Fortunately, he had an uncommon connection with Juji, so even without a spiritual core, he could still summon it. It was extremely difficult, and the setbacks that he had experienced was insurmountable, but in the end, Chu Wanning, by borrowing Juji's spiritual power, managed to tear open an extremely small rift in time and space. It was a rift that could lead to the past. He approached it and faintly heard the sound of a whistle coming from that rift. The gate of time and space, life and death. A whistle would be heard when the door opens, and another whistle will close the door. It was exactly as the legend said. He heard a distant and empty voice ask him, "Sir, where are you going?" At first, his heart was beating like a drum, but when he really reached the end of the bridge, he suddenly calmed down. "Sir, where are you going?" When the voice asked again, Chu Wanning glanced at the Wushan Hall, where the singing and dancing had already started. Today, he had angered Mo Ran, and Mo Ran had already summoned Song Kayutong to accompany him, so he should not be looking for his company that night. He took a deep breath, and his phoenix eyes lit up. "I want to go back to the year when Mo Ran had just been poisoned by the 8 sufferings and everlasting hatred flower." He tried to make his words clearer. That is, the year when the 8 sufferings and everlasting hatred flower was still in its first stage, when everything could still be salvaged. "Do you understand?" No one in the rift answered back, but just as Chu Wanning was about to be disappointed, a ray of light suddenly lit up and a space-time tunnel slowly opened. He stepped into it and the world spun. When everything returned to normal, he opened his eyes and saw a few peach blossoms floating in front of him. He really went back to many years ago. At this time, in the gate of time and space, life and death, the moon was glowing white and the wind was clear. It was late spring. Chu Wanning stood for a while, trying to calm himself down. Then, he pushed aside the flowers and walked out of the rift. He found himself in the back mountain of the sect. He smelled the fragrance of flowers and plants planted by Madame Wang, and there were lights in the distance. That was the light from thousands of disciples' rooms, converging into a quiet Milky Way in the night. Returning to the old Shisheng Peak, it was like a dream. Chu Wanning stood in place. Although there was not much expression on his face, there were mixed feelings in his heart. He walked down slowly, watching the young disciples laughing and playing. He saw Elder Suanji and Elder Lucan competing on the sword training field. After turning a corner, he even saw Madame Wang's fat cat named Veggie Bun. It was squatting on the wall, stretching out its furry head to sniff the blooming Chinese roses on the wall. He was wrong. It was not like a dream. All these years, even in his best dreams, he could not return to the old Shisheng Peak like this. Chu Wanning looked at the scenery in front of him and walked forward alone. He knew that he did not have the habit of leaving the Red Lotus Pavilion at night, so he was not too worried about running into himself in this time and space. As he walked, he suddenly saw two young men walking towards him. One was as bright as a lotus and the other was as dazzling as a bird's tail. His originally slow footsteps finally couldn't help but stop. They were the young Xuemeng and Shimei. End chapter. Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 252. Mount Longxiu, Split Soul. The two of them were talking about something interesting, and both of them had relaxed and bright smiles on their faces. Xuemeng even raised his hand to put a small yellow flower with white petals in Shimei's hair. Shimei didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he plucked it. Xuemeng laughed out loud. Ah, Shizun. It was too late to avoid them. Xuemeng turned his head and saw him from the corner of his eyes. At first, he was stunned, but then he said happily, "It's rare to see Shizun out this late." As he said this, he walked forward to greet him. Shimei also followed with a smile. He said gently and politely, "Greetings to Shizun." Chu Wanning didn't know what to say for a moment. He wanted to calmly return their greetings, but before he could open his mouth, his eyes turned red. Fortunately, the night was very dark and there was enough darkness to cover him. Xuemeng asked curiously like a cat, "Where is Shizun going?" "Going." As soon as he spoke, his voice was incredibly hoarse. He quickly shut his mouth and coughed. After a while, he said, "Just walking around." After a while, he couldn't help but ask, "What about you?" "Shimei and I just came back from Vuchane town. We bought a lot of good food." As soon as he mentioned this, Xuemeng seemed very happy. "There's a temple fair today, so it's very lively." If it were the Chu Wanning of this world, this conversation would have ended there. The Chu Wanning then didn't have too much interest in understanding what these youths were doing, what they bought and why they were so happy. At that time, he was very indifferent, keeping everyone at arm's length. He didn't like to get involved in other people's personal affairs. But today, Chu Wanning felt that whether it was Xuemeng or Shimei, every word, every expression, and even every ray of light in their eyes was very precious. He wanted to look at them a few more times, listen to them a few more times. This was something he could no longer obtain from the world he came from. "So," he asked, "what did you buy? Does Shizun want to see it?" Xuemeng excitedly rummaged through his kinkin bag as if he was presenting a treasure. Dried fruit skin, pine nut crisp, osmanthus candy. While itemizing his hoard, he suddenly took out a handful of osmanthus candy and handed it all to Chu Wanning. "I bought too much, so Shizun should have some of these." Shimei was also rummaging through his bag, but he didn't seem to have bought much. After rummaging through his bag, he couldn't find anything to show off. His ears were a little red. Chu Wanning said, "You don't have to give me much." He picked up 2 or 3 candies and returned the rest to Xuemeng. Under the moonlight, his eyes were almost moist and gentle. "This is enough." He knew that the gate of time and space, life and death could close at any time. He had already overdrawn the power of Juga, so it would not be easy to open it again. Besides, he probably only had this one night. If he returned late, then Taxian Jun might notice something. He struggled to calm down and asked, Where's Mo Ran? Isn't he with you? The two looked at each other. Shuemeng said, I haven't seen him since lunch. Shimei also said, he hasn't been with us for the past few days. He probably has something to do. Chu Wanning went to the disciples' room, but there was no one there. He went to the temple fair to look for him, but he still couldn't find him. Seeing that the time was running out, he couldn't help but feel more anxious. He frowned and thought for a long time. Suddenly, he remembered something. He thought of it. Mo Ran couldn't have gone to. After a while, when the realization came to him, he stopped thinking about it. This burning thought made him uncomfortable. His face slowly darkened, and he couldn't help but clench his fists. He remembered a place where Mo Ran often went when he first went astray. After half an hour, Chu Wanning stood outside a red and purple painted wooden building. There was a red plaque hanging on the building with characters which read Xiantao Tower's Immortal Peach Pavilion. This was the famous Xiantao Tower's Immortal Peach Pavilion. It was already late at night, but the brothel was just beginning to brighten up. There were people coming in from the left and right. Most of them were greasy-looking men and young boys with makeup. Chu Wanning's face was cold and his back was straight. He looked out of place in this kind of crowd. Esteemed guest, please come in. Would you like to take a look? Today, there's a famous actor performing. Ming Dan from Xiangtan. His singing is not inferior to Sun Feng's and his dancing is not inferior to Duan Yuhan's. 80 coins for a scene, 10 more coins for the front row. At the door, the manservant was shouting at the top of his voice. A young master who was waving a scholar's fan happened to pass by and said mockingly, what a shameless boast. What Ming Dan? How dare he challenge the Duan and Sun, two music deities of the past? That's right. 80 coins for a scene, and he has the face to be on the same level as Sun Feng's. Even 800 gold for a scene is not enough for Sun Feng's. This lousy theater is cheating people of money again. A night watchman passed by and laughed while scratching his armpit. Chu Wanning did not understand and felt his head hurt. He simply raised his hand to lift the curtain and entered the building. There were silk lanterns hanging high in the air and it was noisy. Some people were listening to the play, some were drinking and some were floating in the charm and gentleness of the rouge and oil. The performer's golden voice shook the air and her skin was as fresh as spring. On the stage on the first floor, the imperial concubine was drunk and surrounded by flowers. The performer's every move was soft and sorrowful. Even the audience below offered endless sighs and cheers. Good. Good. Do one more scene. Chu Wanning frowned at the pungent fragrance of the rouge and powder. His face was gloomy. He swept his phoenix eyes and looked around, but he did not see the young man. He thought, could it be that he guessed the wrong place again? At this time, the busy hostess noticed him. Like a colorful and beautiful butterfly, she flew toward him. She opened her mouth, which was smeared with vermilion red clouds. She smiled and tried to solicit him, saying, young master, please take a seat and enjoy the play. Chu Wanning looked at her and said, I'm looking for someone. Looking for someone. The madam's smile fell as her gaze turned cold, go on and look by yourself then. Chu Wanning sighed and took off the jade pendant from his waist. It was a beautiful jade given to him by Taxian Jun. It was warm to the touch. He handed the jade to the madam and repeated, I'm looking for someone. The madam took it and examined it. It was full of colorful lights which made her eyes brighten. She coughed lightly and put away the jade. She put on a smile, which was plumper than before, and asked, young master, who are you looking for? A young man who looks to be 15 or 16 years old. Chu Wanning said, his surname is Mo. On the third floor of the Fei Rong Pavilion, the carvings were graceful. It was no wonder that many people were willing to drink here all night. As long as enough money was spent, the actresses and beauties would fabricate a poppy flower-like dream. Many heroes would fall in love with it. If the long night could be passed gently like this, who would be willing to face the devastation of life and the pain of reality? This is the one. The madam raised her long fingers and turned the wooden board with the words Wrong Jew carved on the door. She looked up and thought carefully. She looked at Chu Wanning thoughtfully and said, "Young master, don't be in a hurry. Wait for me to call Ju'er out, then I will invite you in to talk to your friend in the room." Even the madam could see that he cared about him. Chu Wanning closed his eyes and said, "Thank you." She went in. There seemed to be people talking in the room but he could not hear them clearly. After a while, the madam came out again, followed by a young man. Chu Wanning glanced at him. The young man named Rongju still had a flush on his cheeks. He looked familiar from the side, like someone he knew. Rongju bowed to him and left with the madam. Chu Wanning pushed open the door and entered. What he saw was a sea of red and purple, which made his scalp numb. There was no incense in the room, but there was the smell of wine. Mo Ran laid on his side on the bed, his cheek propped up. His slender fingers were still playing with the red tassels tied to the small clay pot. The bed was also red and messy. It was best not to think about what had happened on it. He walked over. Like frost and snow, he stood in the midst of this scene, completely out of place. "Oh. Shizun is here. Sit down and drink a glass of wine? Pear Blossom White, good wine. I'm sure you haven't tasted it before." Chu Wanning said, "You're drunk." Mo Ran smiled and saw the man in white walk to his bed. He was indeed drunk. He suddenly reached out and boldly grabbed Chu Wanning's waist. "It's good to be drunk. When you're drunk, you're not afraid of anything. Come, 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 the night is long. Why don't we mess around?" Chu Wanning did not say anything. He just lifted the young Mo Ran up from the bed. The veins on his hands were slightly protruding. He was a person with the demeanor of a grandmaster. At this time, he was still solemn. Only the trembling of his fingertips betrayed his inner feelings. He closed his eyes and said softly, "Mo Ran." The drunk young man made a sound of "oh." He still did not understand and even had a heartless smile. Chu Wanning said hoarsely, "I'm late." He put his forehead over and moved his fingers. In an instant, the pain was excruciating. In the midst of this tearing pain, a holy weapon appeared. It was like a hatang branch. Its tail was curled up and it has 7 strings of flowing light. It was a gukkan made of divine wood. Chu Wanning gritted his teeth. He made the holy weapon transfer an abundant spiritual energy onto his body. This much spiritual energy was nothing to Taxian Jun, but it was enough for him to cast many spells. He put Mo Ran's forehead close to his and closed his eyes. Then he felt it, there was indeed the aura of 8 sufferings and everlasting hatred flower in Mo Ran's body. It was as if he saw a black double-petaled flower in front of him. It was rooted in his heart and its roots were buried deep in his blood vessels. It was this 8 sufferings and everlasting hatred flower. It was the source of all these evil. Chu Wanning took a deep breath and silently recited the incantation according to the ancient book. Then, he shouted with all his strength, "Split the soul." Chu Wanning suddenly opened his eyes. There was a cold light in his eyes. The 8 sufferings and everlasting hatred flower could only be suppressed by the power of the soul. He did as the book said, tearing off half of his soul and transferred it between their foreheads into Mo Ran's body. A strong wind blew around them. Juga actually sounded like a phoenix. The spiritual energy was burning. Mo Ran. Mo Ran. Shizun didn't protect you well in the past. Now, I'm here to save you. I'll save you. The torn soul fragments turned into wisps of white dust and smoke that kept surging and flowing. Mo Ran was in a daze while Chu Wanning was in extreme pain. Their foreheads kept touching. "I'll save you." When the last ray of light disappeared, the two of them suddenly lost all their strength. Chu Wanning let go of his hand. Mo Ran fell back onto the bed. Zhuge also disappeared. It hid in Chu Wanning's blood and bones. It was very difficult for him to maintain the stability of the holy weapon after losing half of his soul. Chu Wanning sat beside the bed. He slowly closed his eyes. His face was very pale. Even his lips were drained of blood. However, his heart was relieved and relaxed. He had finally taken the first step to changing fate. He used the power of his soul to interfere with the effect of the 8 sufferings and everlasting hatred flower. He didn't want Mo Ran to lose his mind again. By going back in time, he had finally protected him. Chu Wanning couldn't stay for too long. The first thing he had to do was to prevent Mo Ran from being influenced by the 8 sufferings and everlasting hatred flower. He had done that. Now he had to proceed with the next step. He didn't know how powerful the person behind the scenes was. Although that person couldn't tear open a rift in time and space, it was always better to be cautious. He had to make sure that if the disaster happened again, he would be able to recover the memories of the other life and fight it in time. So, the second thing he had to do was to find his past self. All the swirling barrier in the Red Lotus Pavilion were useless against him, and he easily made his way inside. He stood in front of the half-open window and looked at the man in white who was sleeping soundly on the table. The Night Wanderer was half done. It was still being painted. If only the troubles of the human world were only to deal with imps and demons. Chu Wanning transferred the half of his soul that he had already torn into the body of his mortal self. Originally, this soul belonged to him, so he would not feel the slightest bit of discomfort while sleeping. He watched as the pure white light floated over, enveloping the other him with a layer of gentle radiance. Slowly, the glow was extinguished. A breeze passed over and blew the blueprint in Chu Wanning's hand to the ground. If another calamity happened, Mo Ran probably won't be your enemy, he said softly to the person inside as he leaned against the window. Now, my spiritual core was already shattered and my soul has been torn from my body. I can only do this much. I can't change anything in my world. But you can do something for yours. The person inside the room didn't wake up. I divided the weakest of the 3 souls, my earth soul, into 2 halves. I gave one half to you and the other half to Mo Ran. If your lives went smoothly, these 2 halves of the soul won't affect you too much. But if the 8 sufferings and everlasting hatred flower continued to corrupt Mo Ran, or if there is chaos in the human world, then I will try to fuse these 2 halves of the soul together again. If he didn't guess wrong, the moment the 2 halves of the soul were fused, the 8 sufferings and everlasting hatred flower in Mo Ran's body would be completely destroyed and removed. And after the 2 halves of the earth soul were fused together, he would recover the memories of his other life. Chu Wanning said, "Please don't blame me for sharing these things with you. If possible, I also hope that you won't know about them." But he didn't say anything else and only sighed softly. Then he went to do the third thing he set out to do. This thing was the final barrier. He went to find Huizhui. He gave Huizhui an incense burner that he had already lit. In that incense burner, he used the soul fusion spell. This kind of secret technique would draw on the deepest memories in his subconscious and stimulate the 2 halves of the soul to merge together again. Chu Wanning wasn't very sure what his deepest memories were. He felt that there were too many. Perhaps it was the life and death battle when the relationship between master and disciple had completely broken down. Perhaps it was the experience of being made into a blood hourglass after being defeated by Mo Ran. Perhaps it was the pain of being humiliated by Mo Ran for the first time. There were too many. Sometimes, people couldn't see their own selves clearly. He repeatedly told Huizhui to seal the incense burner in the cave of Mount Longxiu. If something strange happened in this human world, he had to bring him and Mo Ran together to that cave with the incense burner. After doing all this, Chu Wanning's time was up. Time and space had the ability to heal itself. Unless it was a destructive rift, the gap between worlds would close by itself. He actually really wanted to stay here, Stay in this clean and peaceful human world where nothing had happened yet. But Chu Wanning knew that he didn't belong here. He wouldn't do anything that went against the principles of the forbidden technique for his own selfish desires and for his own sake. So, he left. He left behind the good dreams of the world behind him and didn't look back. Grandmaster Chu. Returning to his own world, Chu Wanning had just come out of the rift from the back of the mountain and concealed the traces of his spiritual energy when he saw a man in red walking along the bluestone path. It was the old servant who served Mo Ran, Lu Gong. Where did the Grand Master go? His Majesty is looking for you. Chu Wanning asked, where is he? In the Red Lotus Pavilion. When he went to find him, Mo Ran was sitting with his eyes closed under the Chinese wisteria. Seeing him enter, he slowly raised his face. He waved at him. Come here. Chu Wanning pursed his lips, his expression indifferent as usual. Didn't you like the music performance? It ended so early. There's nothing to like, Mo Ran said. After listening to just a few tunes, I got tired of it already. He opened his sleeves and pulled Chu Wanning into his arms. Mo Ran didn't ask where he went. After all, Chu Wanning had never been docile. It would be strange if he stayed in the pavilion and didn't move. He forced Chu Wanning to sit on his lap, kissed the man in his arms on the cheek, and then buried his head in the man's neck. I just had a dream, Mo Ran said with a smile. In the dream, you were teaching me how to write. Chu Wanning was stunned, his heartbeat suddenly stopped. But at the moment, Taxian Jun was immersed in his own memories and couldn't extricate himself, so he didn't notice his strange reactions. He just continued to speak, his tone light, but with a touch of sadness that even he didn't notice. I couldn't write a character well even after 4 or 5 times. You were very angry, but you didn't give up on me. Mo Ran said, then you held my hand, and flowers floated in from the window, I saw. He was so immersed in that dream that he didn't even call himself this venerable one anymore. Mo Ran paused for a moment, his expression was like his young and immature self. I saw it written on the paper, seeing a letter is like seeing. When he said this, he suddenly grinned. It was hard to say whether the smile was of pleasure or malevolence. This kind of thing can only be seen in dreams. He raised his head and looked at the eyes filled with thoughts. Slowly, the coldness that belonged to Taxian Jun returned. Do you know why I wanted to see you all of a sudden? He reached out and touched Chu Wanning's cold cheek. In that dream, you looked very good. Taxian Jun said lightly, you looked so good that I couldn't forget it. So, I wanted to see the real you. Chu Wanning lowered his eyes. I'm afraid that I don't hate you. I want to hate you. Mo Ran said, otherwise I. Suddenly, he was speechless. Otherwise, what? Otherwise, I won't be able to forgive myself anymore. Otherwise, I won't know how to move forward. Otherwise, I won't know how to continue this broken life. I have to hate you. I didn't change and I didn't hate wrongly. Wanning. He finally closed his eyes and sighed, in the end, only you and I are left in this world. For a moment, his heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. Chu Wanning was about to speak when he suddenly felt that he missed a step on the edge of the cliff and fell down. He suddenly woke up from his dream. Chu Wanning suddenly opened his eyes. What entered his eyes was pitch black. He could hear his own drumming heartbeat. Cold sweat trickled down his back. It was as if the gloomy and cold face of Taxian Jun was still in front of him. His entire body trembled as he panted slightly. The memories of his past life surged in, causing the hairs on his back to stand on end, causing him to tremble with fear. However, these memories did not stop there and continued to crazily rush towards him. The jut on his throat moved. Where was he? Where was he? Why couldn't he see him? Why was everything in front of him black? His consciousness was in a mess. After a while, Chu Wanning finally vaguely remembered what happened at Mount Longxue. He slowly regained his senses and murmured, "Mo Ran." At this moment, his cheek was suddenly touched by a warm and soft hand. That hand lifted his chin and stretched out a thumb to rub his lips. Chu Wanning heard a voice that had obviously been cast with the sound-changing spell. It was gently laughing at him. "I've been waiting for you for a long time. You're finally awake." End chapter.